This is the racket used by world number 1 and 4-time world champion Ali Farag. And today we're going to find out if using this racket will help you play like the world number 1 or if only he can harness its true power. The Dunlop FX 128 Pro is probably the most unique racket on the market due to it being extremely head heavy. Now, it's not uncommon for top pros to like a very specific setup that's quite different to the sort that's accessible to the public. However, Dunlop made the bold call to release the official Ali Farag version of the racket alongside a light version that would be a bit more familiar to most people. The FX 128 Pro is the latest version of Ali's racket and boasts a range of different technologies. But as I mentioned before, the main feature of this racket is the fact that it's extremely head heavy. For me, the balance of a racket is much more important than the weight, as that's what affects how it feels when you swing it. In theory, this being a head-heavy racket with a teardrop shape, it should create effortless power. Even holding it right now, it doesn't have the light, wand-like feel that the rest of the FX range have. Instead, it feels like I'm holding the electrified hammer of the Norse god Thor, but the question is, am I worthy to wield such a weapon? We're going to be rating the racket based on 5 attributes: power, control, feel, maneuverability, and looks. Power is all about how much pace you can generate, as well as how easy it is to do so. Control is about how easy it is to hit the ball to the exact target location you want consistently. Feel is about how the ball reacts off the strings and how much ability you have to influence the ball, whether it be with spin or by taking the pace off it. Maneuverability is about how easy it is to handle at speed, as well as the ease of adapting the racket face at the last second. Looks are my personal opinion of how stylish it is visually. I'll be rating each of these out of 10 at the end of the video, so stay tuned. For the solo test, these clips are taken from my first ever hit with this racket. It was a short 30-minute solo practice, so it's a realistic representation of how it performed, as opposed to me spending hours trying to get the perfect clips to make it look better than it is. Every clip used is the first take, and the only cuts I make in these clips are to speed up parts where I'm having to retrieve the ball from another part of the court. The first thing that stood out to me when hitting the first few balls was the stability of the racket. The extra weight in the racket head allowed for a very stable and consistent strike of the ball, which made it extremely easy to generate pace, as well as meaning the ball travels directly to the target area with almost no deviation. For the first main test, I wanted to see how it felt hitting fast straight volleys on either side. At first, the head-heavy balance felt difficult to wield in these fast exchanges due to it being hard to prepare the racket fast enough. The good news is that these exchanges aren't actually particularly common in a match scenario, so it's not really as much of a downside as it sounds. On the other hand, it felt unbelievably good when hitting aggressive one-off volleys to the back of the court, which is much more of a simulation of what would happen in a match. When hitting straight drives out of the back corners, it really started to shine. Again, the heavy racket head allowed for an extremely consistent swing path and follow through. It would have been harder for me to miss the target than for me to hit it, as the racket did all the work for me. It felt particularly great when hitting hard and flat, but had no issues when slowing the pace down and using the strings to float the ball down the wall. The straight drop from the back felt almost impossible to miss too. As I just said, it became apparent that the racket would do a lot of the work for you, so it was almost a case of just trying not to force the swing, and only worrying about having consistent racket preparation, as the follow-through happens almost automatically due to the swing weight. I could foresee it struggling a bit with flicking difficult balls out the back and requiring a particularly strong wrist to do so, but this is something I'll discuss later once I've had a practice match with it. Over the years, I've typically been someone who prefers to use a head-light racket, as it can feel like you have more freedom to do what you want with it. However, it's hard to look past the blend of power and accuracy that this racket has displayed so far. Now we know how effective it is at hitting to the back, let's see if it can perform well when taking the ball in short too. Often rackets can struggle to be good at both length and short hitting, but this is where the FX 128 Pro is unique. I started off by feeding myself with easy shots to see how the ball felt off the strings, and it felt extremely comfortable and able to get good bite on the ball. The heavy head, yet again, allowed for unmatched stability, meaning that the accuracy into the front was sharp and consistent. The true test would come when I started feeding with more pace. This is a great way of seeing how a racket performs in a more realistic match scenario, as most of the time you'll have to take the pace off of a ball when taking the ball in short in a match. This is another area where the racket really excelled. The stability and weight of the racket head meant that it automatically took pace off the ball when I wanted it to. This felt particularly nice on the volley drops, and there was never a moment that I felt like I would hit the ball in the tin or float the ball up too high on the front wall. It comes back to the ball flying very straight and direct off of the strings. When hitting these volley drops, I definitely felt like I could trust that the racket would do what I wanted it to. The stock Dunlop Iconic Pro AF strings also feel surprisingly good when taking the ball in short. The final solo test was to see how hard I could hit the ball and with how much effort it took to generate the maximum pace. It didn't take long to figure out that it took almost no effort to generate a huge amount of pace on the ball. This effortless power should mean that it's easy to find your length on a colder court or if you're under pressure. Now, a lot of people would say their conclusion at this point of the video, but I know from experience that a racket can feel amazing in a solo practice but fall completely flat when it comes to playing a match. For this reason, I'm going to play a practice match with it and tell you whether it lived up to how it felt in the solo test. Okay, so I'm back from my practice match and it actually went pretty well. So what I've gathered from this racket is that Dunlop have somehow managed to maximise the amount of power and control a racket can have simultaneously. So most rackets, you kind of have one or the other. This one is top level with both the control and the consistency and how it feels when hitting deep and hitting short, as well as being able to generate more power than I've ever felt from a racket before. But something has to be able to pay for that, and it comes at the cost of its manoeuvrability. Now, if you play in the right way and you're good at anticipating and you're not having to dig too many balls out the back because you're taking the ball early, then it doesn't matter too much that the manoeuvrability isn't as good as some other rackets. However, if you are the sort of player that's a little bit erratic and is going to get into a lot of really fast exchanges around the front and reaction stuff, or maybe you're a doubles player, this probably isn't the racket for you. However, I do encourage anyone to try this racket at any level, because it could be what you're looking for to make sure you're hitting a really consistent length, but also having the stability and consistency taking the ball in short. I'll be honest with you, I didn't expect to like the racket when I first was told about testing it. I was excited to try it, but I didn't expect to like it based on the fact that I typically use even balance or headlight rackets, or have done over the last 15 years. But once I started hitting with it and I started to get used to it and did a good warm up with it, so got used to the fact that it's a little bit heavier in the head and that having fast hands is a bit more difficult with it. Once I warmed that all up, just the fact that it was so solid and robust made up for it massively. And there's just something about it. When you hit a fast, flat length, straight or cross, it almost goes so quickly that the opponent just can't react to it, even if you've hit what would otherwise be quite an average shot. Just the pace can get past people. And you can see Ali Farag do that too when he plays, especially when he whips a cross court. Sometimes the opponent can't even react to it because it's coming so fast off the strings. It also has really nice feel compared to what I expected. It's actually one of the best rackets at taking the pace off the ball that I've used. So it's very good at dealing with someone hitting quite hard. You can kind of soak it up and redirect it into the space really nicely. But that brings us on to the official results and the official ratings for each attribute. For power, I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. Now, I haven't experienced power like it. There's just so much weight in the head. The ball just flies off like a catapult. It's very satisfying. For control, I'm also going to give it a 10 out of 10. I think because it is so head heavy, there is no deviation in swing ever. It's so consistent. The ball goes exactly where you want it to go every time. It's harder to, like I said before, it's probably harder to miss where you want to hit than it is to actually hit the target, just because the racket does all the work for you. Now, I want to specify, or I want to stress here, giving a 10 in power and a 10 in control is not something I would do for any other racket. I didn't think it was possible to achieve that before testing this racket. I'm as shocked as some of you may be hearing that, because I just thought one had to give. But instead, what's had to give is the maneuverability, as I mentioned before. So the maneuverability rating is going to only be a 3 out of 10. I can't think of a racket that would, a modern racket at least, that would be worse for maneuverability. But like I say, that can be overcome. The amount of fast exchanges you have around the mid-court in squash, it's actually less than you would expect at most levels. And if you are on top of those exchanges, it's still fine. It's just, let's say you're playing doubles and there are a load of reaction shots in a row, then it might be difficult to deal with. But in a single squash match, it's perfectly fine at dealing with them. The other situations that might be a little bit trickier than with other rackets are around the back of the service box, cutting balls off there, or digging a difficult ball out the back corner. But the way you see someone like Ali deal with that is he's got a very strong wrist, and a lot of players have quite strong wrists, so you're able to overcome that. It's not as bad as it sounds. The other thing, the fourth attribute, was feel. And I'm going to give feel an 8 out of 10. Now, there are rackets out there that have extremely nice feel, and this is definitely up there. I wouldn't say it is as good as certain rackets, but those rackets don't come close when it comes to power, usually. So an 8 out of 10 is a very good result there, especially for like a teardrop racket too. Often you get a bit more feel from a round head racket at the cost of power. And finally, the looks. Visually, how do I think it looks? I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 on looks, because I think it looks very classy. I like the blue colour of the FX range now. It's quite stealth-like with the matte black colour on the handle and the rest of the racket. It looks very professional and clean. There's not too much going on with it. So I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Not my favourite ever looking racket, but definitely up there with a good looking racket. So I hope that's given you some insight into the Dunlop FX 128 Pro squash racket, and that you might even consider giving it a go. Thanks for watching, guys. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it, and see you next time.